You have everything you need: food that never runs out, water on tap, a home with the temperature always set to comfortable, no predators, no winter, no hunger. By almost every measure, your ancestors would have called it paradise. But the real answer is far stranger than paradise. Because a scientist once built exactly that. Not for humans, for mice. And what happened inside that perfect world should make the hair on your arms stand up. His name was John B. Calhoun. He was a behavioral researcher working with the National Institute of Mental Health, and in 1968 he began an experiment he called Universe 25. The number mattered. It meant he had done this 24 times before. He knew the pattern. He was about to watch it happen again. The setup was simple. He built a metal enclosure, a little over 2 meters on each side. Inside it, he placed unlimited food, unlimited water, nesting material. Climate control kept the air at a steady, pleasant warmth. He removed every disease he could. There were no cats, no hawks, no threats of any kind. It was, in the most literal sense, a utopia for mice. Then he placed 4 healthy pairs inside. 8 mice. And he waited. At first, everything went the way you would expect. The mice explored, they claimed territory, they mated, and the population began to double roughly every 55 days. This was the golden age. Food was everywhere. Space was everywhere. The colony exploded with life. But here is the thing about a closed world. It has edges, and the mice were about to find them. By day 315, the population had climbed past 600, and something began to shift. The growth slowed, not because of hunger, not because of space. The enclosure could physically hold thousands. It slowed because the social world of the mice was breaking down. And that breakdown is the part of this story that refuses to stay in the past. Think about what a young mouse needs to become a functioning adult. It needs a role, a territory to defend, a mate to win, a place in the hierarchy. In a normal environment, the weak and the unlucky die or leave, and that makes room. But in Universe 25, nobody died of the usual causes. Nobody left. There was nowhere to go. So the older mice simply never vacated their positions, and a generation of young mice grew up with nothing to do, nowhere to belong, and no way to climb. What happens to a creature with no role to fill? Calhoun found out. The males who couldn't win territory didn't just fade quietly. Some became hyper-aggressive, attacking others for no reason, then wandering off in a daze. Others withdrew completely. They gathered in the center of the enclosure in listless, passive clumps, absorbing attacks without fighting back, without fleeing, without any reaction at all. They had given up on being mice, and the females changed too. In a healthy colony, a mother mouse fiercely defends her nest and raises her pups. But as the social fabric frayed, mothers began to abandon their young. Some attacked their own offspring. Others simply forgot them, wandering away mid-task as if the instinct had switched off. Infant mortality in parts of the enclosure climbed above 90%. The most fundamental drive in any mammal, the drive to protect the next generation, was quietly dissolving. Calhoun had a name for all of this. He called it the behavioral sink, a place where behavior collapses inward on itself, and he watched it swallow the colony whole. Have you ever felt a strange unease in a crowd that has everything and wants nothing? Then came the generation that unsettled Calhoun the most. He called them the beautiful ones. These were mice, mostly males, who withdrew from the chaos entirely. They never fought, they never courted, they never tried to mate. Instead, they did only 3 things. They ate, they slept, and they groomed themselves, over and over, until their coats were flawless. Sleek, clean, unscarred, physically perfect, and completely empty. They had opted out of the struggle of being alive. To a casual eye, The beautiful ones looked like the healthiest mice in the universe. No wounds, no stress, no conflict. But they were, in every way that mattered, already gone. They had no interest in others, no drive to reproduce, no curiosity. They were, as Calhoun put it, capable of only the most simple behaviors. The complex dance of mouse social life, courtship, competition, cooperation, was gone from them, and it never came back. By day 560, the population peaked at around 2,200 mice, and then it began to fall. Not slowly, not gently. Births nearly stopped. The last conception happened around day 920. After that, not a single new mouse was born. The colony that had everything was now doing the one thing no species is supposed to do in paradise. It was choosing, in effect, to end. Calhoun tried an experiment inside the experiment. He took some of the healthy-looking survivors and moved them to a fresh, empty enclosure with plenty of space. The same conditions where the original 8 had thrived. And nothing happened. They didn't rebuild. They didn't repopulate. The behaviors they needed, the how of being a mouse, had never formed in the first place. You cannot draw water from a well that was never dug. By 1973, Universe 25 was silent. Every mouse was dead. A perfect world, with no scarcity and no danger, had produced total extinction. So what killed them? This is where you have to be careful, because the easy answer is the wrong one. For decades, people looked at Universe 25 and said, overcrowding. Too many bodies in too small a space. But look closer. The enclosure was never physically full. There was always food, always water, always room. The mice weren't dying of crowding in the way you'd cram too many people into an elevator. They were dying of something subtle. Calhoun's own conclusion pointed elsewhere. He believed the real crisis was social. What broke wasn't the supply of resources. It was the supply of roles, of meaning, of a place to matter. When every niche was filled and there was no way to earn status, to be needed, to strive for anything, the young mice were left in a kind of social limbo. And a mind with nothing to strive for, he argued, begins to wither. This is where later researchers urge caution, and they're right to. Universe 25 was mice, not people, and a single enclosure is not a controlled clinical trial. Scientists like the medical historian Edmund Ramsden have gone back to Calhoun's work and pointed out that it was as much a mirror for the anxieties of its era as it was hard biology. The 1960s were gripped by fear of a population bomb, and Calhoun's dying utopia became a symbol far bigger than 8 mice ever should have been. So hold this lightly. It is a story, not a law. And yet, the pattern he described has an uncomfortable way of echoing. Because Calhoun was never really talking about density of bodies. He was talking about density of interaction. In the crowded center of Universe 25, every mouse was constantly surrounded by others, forced into contact it could not control, unable to find the quiet, unable to find a role, unable to escape. He coined a phrase for what a mind does under that pressure. He called it death of the spirit, the first death, which came long before the body finally stopped. Now think about the world you actually live in. You are surrounded by more people than any human in history. Your ancestors lived in bands of maybe 150 faces. The same faces for their entire lives. That number even has a name. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar found that the human brain seems built to hold about 150 stable relationships, and no more. It is roughly the size of a Neolithic village. It is the shape of the social world your mind was designed for. But you don't live in a village of 150. You live in a stream of thousands. Faces scroll past you all day, every day, most of them strangers, many of them performing, all of them just out of reach. You are in constant contact and almost no connection. You are, in a sense, standing in the crowded center of the enclosure. Does any of this sound familiar yet? Look at what Calhoun's mice actually did in their final generations, and try not to flinch. They withdrew from one another. They lost interest in mating and raising young. They turned inward, toward grooming, toward appearance, toward the safe and simple pleasures that asked nothing of them. Across much of the developed world today, birth rates are falling below replacement. In Japan, in South Korea, in Italy, In country after country, people are choosing fewer children, or none. Not because of famine, not because of war. In the middle of the most abundant era humans have ever known, that is not proof of anything. Human beings are not mice, and our reasons are tangled, economic, cultural, personal, and far more complex than a metal box. Do not let anyone tell you that a rodent experiment explains your life. It does not. But the resemblance is close enough to be worth sitting with. Because here is the quiet lesson buried in Universe 25. It was never the hardship that destroyed the mice. It was the absence of it. They had no mountain to climb, so they stopped climbing. They had no struggle to define them, so they came undone. The thing that broke them was not too little. It was too much, handed over too freely, with nothing left to reach for. And you feel a version of this, don't you? The strange flatness of a day where everything is convenient, the restlessness on the other side of getting what you wanted, the pull toward the beautiful, empty comfort of the screen, the scroll, the feed, the perfectly groomed image of a life. The beautiful ones did not look like they were suffering. They looked serene. That was the tragedy. They had traded the difficulty of a full life for the ease of an empty one, and they could no longer tell the difference. So what do you do with a warning wrapped in the corpse of a mouse colony? You notice. You notice that the human animal was not built for endless ease, but for the pursuit of things that are hard. You notice that meaning does not arrive when the striving stops. It lives inside the striving. The friction, the risk, the role you have to fight to earn, the people you choose to be responsible for even when nothing forces you to. These are not the obstacles to a good life. Calhoun's mice suggest they might be the entire point. You have everything you need. Food that never runs out. A home always set to comfortable. And that, it turns out, was never the paradise. That was only ever the test.